Well, hello and a warm welcome once again to It's Your Own Time You're Wasting, in which Terry and Olly talk teaching, all things to do with teaching. Myself, Terry Wood, here in London, and my good friend and former colleague, Olly Furnival, over in Japan. Right,
Evening.
Olly, going to hit you with something.
Okay.
You'll cast your mind back. Because we're well past this, you're a young teacher, you're at your first school, you started in September, whatever your subject, doesn't matter. It's November. You've got a year 10 class. Now, they are quite bright eyed and bushy tailed. They're into your subject. You haven't had big
Yeah.
problems with that. There's been a few glitches and behavioural issues, but nothing major, of course. So things are going well. It's a morning or an afternoon in the middle of November, and you notice at the back of the class there's two girls. We'll say girls, it doesn't matter. There's two girls you have been close friends, good friends,
Yeah.
and there seems to be something going on between them, and you don't quite get on top of it. You carry on with your teaching. Suddenly, there's bad language, there's tears, there's shouting, there's a chair going over. You go to intervene, and this girl who's clearly not in any condition to stay pushes past you and nearly knocks you over whilst telling you to F off out of the way. She runs out of the classroom, she slams the door, she's gone. Your class and now all staring at you. There's 30 pairs of 14, 15-year-old eyes staring at you. What are all the things you have to do?
Right. Well, thanks for that.
Yeah,
Well, I think, yeah, first of all, it's important to know that your response might well be remembered as much, if not more, than the students telling each other to F off, which they do all day long, and they've probably had spats here and there. So I think if that happened to me as a student teacher, and now I hope my response will be a lot calmer now.
mm.
And the first thing I would say to my younger self and to the new teachers is, yeah, in that situation, you're not the important one. You've been told to F off. That's because you're the teacher. It's not because you're Mr. Furnival or Mr. Wood. Okay, so you need to obviously remember that.
Mm.
And I think, well, first of all, of course, if a student's in stormed off, you need to make sure there's care for that student.
Yeah,
If you've got
yeah.
TA,
Number one, yeah,
if you've
yeah,
got a sensible student,
yeah.
you can ask them to go find them, to alert someone, because
Mm.
we don't know the background, we don't know where that girl or boy might be going or what they
It
might be
could leave the
doing.
school premises and be
Exactly.
unsafe. Yeah,
Exactly. If someone's not in your room and they've gone out like that, someone else needs to know.
no,
Now, you can't be chasing them around the corridor because
no,
you've got the class to look after.
yeah,
Plus, they might not be in a state where they want to talk to you. They'll be embarrassed. Probably
yeah.
9 out of 10 students are going to be very embarrassed about the situation. Okay. So I think, first of all, yeah, both students, certainly the one who's left the room, you need to ensure you have someone aware of where they are. And it doesn't matter if they don't come back for that class, could be
No,
better. Could be
no.
that a colleague or someone says, right, I'll look after them for the rest of the
Probably,
class.
probably best
Else
if
the
they
room.
don't come back,
Probably
given those
best.
particular circumstances.
Probably
Yeah,
best now. Yeah, in most schools, even now, that would be quite a thing to tell the teacher to F off in front of the
yeah,
class. And so when that's been sorted and you're quite happy that that student has gone and they're in or being cared for out of the
yeah.
room. Of course, yeah, the kids are going to want to know your response. So yeah, now having been in the job a long time, might well come up with, well, I heard worse from my wife this morning. Something to break the ice, something to break the ice with the class, something to show not I'm going to ignore it, not that I'm going to put up with it, but not that I'm going to scream and shout and
Yeah,
show that I react, because my reaction is going to be very important. So,
yeah,
oh my God, so and so saw Mr. Furnival and he started slamming the desk and shouting. Well, I'm just going to make it worse. And
yeah,
unfortunately, there may well be some who see, well, let's see what I can do to get the teacher to behave like this. I think what I would do long term, short to long term, is okay in the class. I might now say that, or I might say, okay, come on, show's over. The girl who stayed in the class, I might take her outside for a minute, check she's okay, talk to her, explain that for now, all we want to do is go back. Can she go back? Can she sit down with the rest of the group, carry on the activity? She's not sworn at me, and I will make sure that I speak to her if necessary, get some support for her. But let's say I don't need to, then well, I want to take the the lights away from her. I don't want to make her the spectacle. I'm not going to tell her off there and then.
Mhm.
Um, I don't want to embarrass her because she could be the next one to tell me to F off. She's probably heightened emotional state. So for now, I want to calm the situation. It might be that I have the door open and let her stand for a few minutes again if she wants to talk to someone. But hopefully, I can get her back in the room once that's happened. But it might well be that take her out of the room for a while, get the class. Okay, show's over.
Yeah,
Let's settle down.
get them
Deal with
back
this later.
working. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'd even say to class, right? I'll be dealing with this later. For now, we get back later. Just say, make sure that the class know that this is going to be dealt with
Yeah.
um, in an appropriate manner. It doesn't mean I need to do it that second. Um, in dealing with it like that, I hope I can get some kind of normality back into the lesson. I need the situation calmed down. So it might well be the girl stands outside for a while. I check in and out. I'll make sure I even stood by the door. Okay, you keep on working. And I've done this a few times. Your head's in the door, but it's also in the corridor. Okay, if you feel that she can come in without a "Ugh," or let's carry on the gossip, you see, you got to now, in this situation, as a new teacher, you might not feel the confidence of knowing that class well enough. But once you're there long enough, you will know, can you trust the class that she can go back in and be part of the lesson for the rest of the class, hold gossip till break, next lesson, and off. If she can, fantastic. She goes in, she maybe carries on working alone, she maybe keeps working in the group. But you've got to make that judgment call. It might be if you make that judgment call and you let her back in and all you're getting is gossip, 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 you're going to have to step in again and act and maybe say, okay, enough now. We're working in silent 5 minutes. Or you even say to that student as well, okay, for this lesson, you need to be parted from this class, depending on how serious it is. If it's just a squab with a friend and that happen, I think majority is there'll be giggles and stuff, but they'll probably calm down and let her back into the classroom.
But what about
With
after, I mean, obviously it's a
yes,
serious thing for a student to use that sort of language and to
so
storm out
yeah,
of the classroom. What happens afterwards? It can't,
okay,
you can't decide, can you, as the young teacher, I'll just keep this in
no,
what
it's got to
goes
be
on in
dealt
the
with.
room, stays on in the
And
room. What happens next?
what happens next afterwards? Yeah. So once it's all dust is settled, you've got to make sure, along with the school policy, along with the behaviour policy for that school, that you follow that to the letter because it's going to get around the whole year group. It's going to get around, just that happened, and so
Yeah,
is
it's
your
got to be
reaction. So
reported in whichever system as
yeah,
quickly as possible exists in that school.
in
It
that
can't
in
be
that
just brushed under the carpet. No.
100%. You would deal with form tutors, head of year would be the main. I should think for that level, depending on the student's record, for that level, it might go up to as the highest the head of year, and then a sanction must take place, and it's got to be seen to be taken place. Okay, so it's got to be seen that whatever you do, my own personal thing, if a student, of course, it depends on who the student is. It could be a kid who's the best ever kid who's just lost it that day, or it could be a kid who you think has got form on his, and both will need talking to, but it might be in a different in a different way. Personally, now certainly, if it was I'm a male teacher and it was a girl who's told me to f off, I would do that with a pastoral leader, a form tutor,
Mhm.
a head of year about what's happened and talk through the situation and why that's unacceptable. I would expect an apology, but wouldn't ask for
Yeah.
one. There's nothing worse than a fake apology, but I would expect most
Yeah. Good
students
point.
to be
Yeah.
embarrassed
Yeah.
and most students would apologize. However, that is not going to change my sanctions for it. But let's say the student spends time out of your lesson or is given a detention. I would I would now address this issue with the class the next
Yeah.
time I see it. Say, okay, this happened last week. Unfortunate incident. It's been dealt with in the appropriate way. We now move on because I think it's important that you've shown the class that no matter how you've got on with them so far, that there are lines, and that's a clear line that's been crossed there, and you have dealt with the situation. But yes, I would also make sure that parents were involved in any communication. We'll come to that maybe later, but most
Yeah.
of the time, you see, if this is a student, now you said in this scenario you got on well with them, but they need to know that you know people, you
Yeah.
know the counsellors, you know the head of year, you know the form tutor, you know their parents, and you will act on that when something's happened in the classroom. They're far less likely to misbehave if they know, actually, oh God, Mr. Fun was actually going to report this on. If you sweep it under the carpet,
Yeah.
then you're going to come back and bite you another time in the future. even if it's someone else saying, well, so and so swore at you, you didn't do anything then, so what you picking on me for? And then you're going to be left without, many options. So in short, you've got to deal with it. You've got to deal with the um, supportive colleagues. You've got to follow the policy. Whatever the punishment is, I believe a conversation needs to happen with that student before the next time they're allowed in your classroom, where you relay the rules and you
Yeah,
say
they call
next
them
time.
restorative. Certainly here in London and Britain, we're calling them restorative conversations.
Yeah, sort of conversation. And in that, you set the boundaries again, you set the rules, you explain that's not going to happen again in my class. You're not going to go down the why did you do it? That's for someone else. In this situation, you're not going to try, in my opinion, you're not going to try to get any, oh, you've hurt my feelings, oh, I need to sympathy. You're just going to say, no, in my class, we will treat each other with respect. There will not be
Yeah.
swearing. Should it happen again, it will be reported again and it will go up the line of punishment. So yeah, I think a conversation has got to happen before a student is allowed in the room who's sworn at you. I would probably push for the next lesson in my class, the student's taken out and maybe sat with a colleague and do work in another class, just to show the class that something's happened. At least the student's been taken out of class for a lesson.
Yeah, really comprehensive. You're clearly using all your experience there. It's
I've been sworn
interesting.
at.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I was very lucky. I mean, obviously things happen, but I got through 27 years without being told to F off directly. So I'll take that as a badge of honor. Don't know how I managed
yeah,
that, but I did seem to manage it. Well, just going back to a couple of things that you said, the idea that you've got to report this, you can't keep it in the room on your own. It's strange, isn't it? Because certainly when I first started, we've already alluded to this. It was all about doing it yourself, and a lot
right.
of stuff was kept within the room because the system didn't exist. It was you get on with it, you form your own relationship, you do what you need to do. That's changed. You can't do that
Yeah,
anymore.
no,
I also like the fact, and less experienced people wouldn't get this point. You cannot insist and demand and force an apology
no.
because they are more often than not, particularly from adolescents, often any human beings really false, and that doesn't help.
Hmm.
You'll tend to find you will get one. Very, very rarely have I dealt with a child who's blown up in the moment, who doesn't, once they've cooled down, eventually find some way of saying sorry. Very, very,
Yeah,
very, very
very
rare.
rare, very rare.
And yeah, I think between us, that's how we. It's pretty much everything you've said. I deal with it in the same way. So it just shows you. And this is the point. It's obvious that for those watching that we're going to be talking about behaviour management today, which is just a huge part of teaching. Whether people would like to deny it or not, it is. It's a huge preoccupation. We, in the previous session, talked about forming and developing positive relationships for students, and it goes to that QTS Standard 7, which is a mixture of the two, and you can't have one without the other. Not today, it just doesn't work. So we're going to start to talk today about that more formal, how do you deal with, how do you manage behavior, what systems are in place, what are their approaches. So that's what we're going to start looking at today. So the next question I'd ask you, Ollie, is why is this area just so significant in the profession? Why is it so important? Why does it preoccupy us or we professionals so much?
Yeah, so I think it's the core of everything you do, and you
Yeah,
probably won't realize how important it is until you're in your first class, you alone, maybe with
yeah,
another adult support, in front of 30 students, 30 different characters who, as we kind of said before, not all want to be there.
yeah,
Not all are as motivated, not all are as interested in your subject. And plus, we're talking with 30-ish, humans, all with their relationships with each other, all with their own way they want to be seen, all with their own issues outside of school. So put all that into a melting pot, and you you're dealing with humans. If we were teaching 12 robots and I had 20 robots, whatever, I had this perfect lesson plan, it would be absolutely fine. Now, I've never been in a classroom where it works like that. So I think even whatever you do as a teacher, you could have the best lesson on paper, but you're not going to get it. You're not going to get the students to be able to do what you would like them to do, all of them, unless you have control of
yeah,
the management of the class. And the management of the class can come in so many different ways. Obviously, the first one is behavior. The second one is groupings. The third one is what activities, how long are they going to be? How do you start the class? How do you end the class? Who speaks? How do you get answers? All of these things. Where do students sit? What time of day is it? What was the lesson before? What's coming up
Yeah.
later? What
Where are
time of
they
year?
coming? Where are they coming from? What's
Oh
just happened?
God, we can talk about that later. Yeah.
Yeah.
All of those ingredients, so many ingredients put into a pot for your 1 hour, some things you won't
Yeah.
even think about. And then suddenly you've got to manage that. You've got to manage 30 people who are at different levels of maturity, at different levels, obviously different ages, depending on the age group you're teaching. It's human science, it's human behavior,
Yeah.
and there's no one answer fits all, which is why you've got to have a lot of tricks up your sleeve in dealing with situations. You can deal with one situation one way that works well, try it again with another class and it doesn't. So for me, it's what teachers talk about because it's vital for the lesson, for you to be able to meet your learning objectives, for students to be along the ride with you, that if you have not got control over that class, even, and the biggest thing, we talk about swearing at teachers. Luckily, that's quite rare.
Yeah. Oh,
But
it
low
is.
level
Yeah.
disruption isn't rare.
Yeah.
Talking when you're
Yeah.
talking, flicking things at each other, no, not the right equipment. I teach here in Japan, and the stereotype would be that, yeah, everything's perfect. It isn't by any stretch of the imagination. There's still low level behavior that I see on a day-to-day basis that needs clear guidelines and clear
Yeah.
expectations. So for me, it's everything, not just in lessons, it's the corridors between lessons, it's queuing up for break, snack shop, it's the behavior in and out of school. All of this needs to be linked together to be able to get students, the average score, a thousand odd students under our care in a day. I mean, it's a pretty good task, the fact that 100 whatever teachers can get that running smoothly. I think, yeah, it's a skill. I've been in profession many, many years. I still make mistakes in it. You can still misjudge, but you do get better. And I'll come, we'll talk about that as we go on today. But yeah, for me, it's the core of everything, and you might not realize that until you're actually in the classroom, because yeah, it is. It's there. It's everywhere.
Yeah. It is. If you haven't got control, the kids aren't being educated. Their
No.
educational experience is being spoilt or maybe even ruined. We've all had experiences that probably when we were at school we know of. We'll talk about, without naming
Mhm.
names, talk about colleagues soon, and we knew that things were not going well.
And what we
I
can't,
always remember when I first started teaching, I'll call him by his first name, not his second name. A teacher who was on the point of retirement called Stan up in Southport, and he had a little conversation with me a few weeks in. I was doing okay, but obviously I was young and struggling in some regards. And he had a little one-to-one with me, head to head, and he got his thumb out and said, "You've got to have them here." And he made a real point of saying, unless you've got an iron grip, you can do anything you want educationally as long as you've got that control. Don't forget though, Stan was the guy that used to throw the board dusters at kids and was
yeah,
busy hitting them with a strap or a cane a few years
yeah.
before. Well, but the point remains,
Point remains.
and I
Times have
go into
changed.
schools. I go into schools now where the fundamental central ethos in very, very strict new academy chains and academy standalone schools in London, where behaviour in the distant past was poor, and all this money's been spent on establishing these new environments, is on the wall of every classroom. Everybody has a right to be able to learn all at points during the day or words to that
Yeah.
effect. You will not disrupt. Your education will not be disrupted by low level or any kind of misbehavior. And, going back to a conversation we've had in the past, people would be surprised, I think, if they went into most, not all, most schools in Britain today, they would be really surprised about how rigorous behavior management is. And of course, going back to the human point is, I've been out of teaching for 10 years. Right? I haven't taught class for 10 years. My job, obviously, now is observing other people teaching
Sure.
in many, many different places and giving them advice. So I'm still in the classroom. I still, about 2 or 3 times a year, probably have that dream where I'm in a school I don't recognize. I'm a bit late. I've got a class and it's all going terribly, terribly wrong. I'm losing control. They're beating me to a pulp, not metaphorically, not physically.
Yeah. It's
every teacher I talk to, wherever they are in their career or after their careers, we all have that dream, don't we?
uh, honestly fairly recently. In fact, it is with a
It's
class who
weird,
I have
isn't
no
it?
problems with. And in my dream, they were just answering back. They weren't working. Yeah, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. Um,
You
just to
wake
pick
up
up
with
what you
relief, don't
said.
you? Flooded with relief when you
Oh
wake
yeah,
up.
oh,
Oh
and
my
then
God.
even
In
the
my
next
case,
time I
I'm not
saw them,
teaching anymore. Stop worrying.
even the next time I saw them, I thought, oh, in my dream, you're horrible. Isn't
Yeah.
it? What a thing about classroom management, why it's so important is, I think, yeah, that Stan. Obviously, times are different, but there are different ways of getting that control. And I will talk about some teachers we've seen use different ways. But for me, the fundamental, the thing that really got me when I was new in my career is how much one or two students can change the total atmosphere of a
Yeah.
class. It
Yeah.
only takes one or two, and they can destroy a lesson, and they can create and destroy an atmosphere. I remember early on in my first school, I was having a bit of trouble with year 8 class. I was quite new, and I remember one day one student was away, and it was absolutely fine,
Yeah.
and he came back, and it was pain again. And yeah, I clocked that early, and I learned a quick lesson, and I spoke to that kid, and yeah, one or two can really control the atmosphere of that class, and you've got to make sure. My uncle was a teacher, a lot older than me now. He's passed now, but when I was training, make friends with the worst kids, get on side with the worst kids. If you can be with them, the others will fall. I remember him saying that one night before I'd even
Yeah.
started, and
Well, we talked about that, didn't we, in
yeah,
developing strong relationships with
yeah,
students, and you've got to find clever, you've got to be the adult and the intelligent one and find clever ways with the so-called baddies for the sake of
yeah,
all the other kids. And obviously, a lot of young teachers coming in now are not going to have those skills because it's a different world in many
mm,
respects. So having the strong systems, the schools realise the system has to come first. And sometimes I go into schools where they are so prescriptive, so strict, so
yeah.
rigorous, so clear cut. Everybody does exactly the same. It can feel a little bit artificial and a bit
Well,
stifling, but there's a good reason for it. These are places where 20, 30 years ago, the previous school that used to stand on that site was bedlam.
yeah.
And now the children from particularly inner city locations whose parents, let's say, had to put up with that, are now getting a completely different experience. And there's so much money being spent that nobody's going to allow it to fall apart in a few years because there's no disciplinary control. So
Well,
it's a
I'm not.
huge, huge part of everything we do. Sorry, Ollie.
I
Yeah.
think no, no. Sorry. I think consistency, what you're kind of getting at there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure of that type of school that you've seen recently, but the last two schools I've been in, not that I'm in now, consistency is vital, and students will be the first to pick
Yeah.
up if one teacher lets one get away with it. If the school rules aren't consistent and are not being followed consistently, these students are clever. I had a teacher the other day telling me, well, it's all up to the form tutor to ensure that makeup and stuff sorted out in the morning. Yes, true. However, if I've got a strict form tutor, what am I going to do? Play ball for him or her,
Yeah.
go to the toilet after form, put my makeup on, and go to a teacher who's not going to challenge me. I've seen it
Yeah.
happen a few times. And you just got to be consistent.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. You're absolutely right. So let's go back to you. What was your approach when you started? What sort of disciplinarian were you? What were the things that you held dear in your approach in the classroom? Just to personalize a little bit before we talk
Yeah,
about other things we've seen.
sure. I probably took it too personally at the start.
Yeah.
I was in a new subject, citizenship, as we've said, only the
Yeah.
second cohort. Although I did teach more traditional history RE in the first few years, but I was a teacher who put so much into the planning because I really wanted to have interactive lessons, and then you see students just stick, the metaphorical two fingers up. And I took it too personally, I think. And I
Yeah.
know I spoke to people like you and other colleagues, and maybe I was jumping on things too much. And I learned there's different ways of getting the control without picking on everything that needs to be picked up on. So I think I was always really on it.
Yeah.
on behaviour management, and in the end, that really paid the way because within a year or two, I had very few problems, and I think that's
Yeah.
important to note. New teachers, when you're in your second year of school, it's
It gets
so
better.
different to the first year.
Yeah.
They've got new blood, they've got fresh meat. You're not interesting anymore. You
Yeah.
survive that first year. In the second year, the
Yeah.
kids who were a pain the year before, it's suddenly, oh, all right again, sir. Have a nice summer. It's like, yeah, okay, great. And
Yeah.
but let's make sure you've done things right in the first place. So for me, I probably pounced on too much into a forceful manner. I expect I do still have very high expectations. What something that you said earlier, my big thing was you don't have the right to disrupt other people's learning because I found some students would disrupt. And I say, look, I don't care if you like my subject or not. You sit down, be bored, do it in silence. Because
Yeah.
the vast majority, when you think about, I've got a bad class, it's not a bad class. The majority aren't.
Never.
I might
Never.
come on to
Yeah.
it later. I've only really had one bad class in my career. The rest have been the silent majority are not bad kids. And okay, they might not be singing and dancing, loving your lessons, but they do want to learn. It's a small majority that don't. And you've got to find
Totally.
ways and tactics. Assertive discipline, I learnt very quickly.
Yeah,
As
explain
a
to people that don't know what, because it's a phrase that gets bandied around
mm.
occasionally, and some might not understand that. What is assertive discipline?
Some of the mistakes I was making was allowing questioning. Why have you got your
Why do
phone
you?
out?
Yeah.
I haven't got my phone out. Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen you on phone. No, it wasn't me. I remember one boy. I took him out of the classroom, which is important. You don't want an audience. You don't want to embarrass the student. Took him out of the classroom, right? Hand you over your phone. I've seen your phone. No, I haven't got it. Why do you have a phone out? And literally, you then get into an almost a comedy sketch, a Monty
Yeah.
Python comedy sketch. So assertive discipline is more you're factual. Okay, what I do now is you will not have your phone out in my class. Is that clear?
Yeah.
And what you're doing is you won't shout out my lesson. You're telling them facts that they can't argue with. Because what they're saying, yes, I will. So assertive discipline is having the clear rules of the school phased in the way that students can't then say, well, he did it. That's not fair. You make it very clear. You go up. I like to have a quick word outside a lesson. Okay, you won't do that in my classroom. Okay, I might even have the school rule book out. You will not shout out in my classroom. Okay, and I think I got used to doing that a lot more, where students really couldn't have an answer back because some will answer black or white, some is white, some know if you take their phone, their mum's going to do X, Y, and Z. They're not going to have the phone for the weekend. Even worse sometimes. So they feel backed into a corner. So I think it's vital that you have these phrases that you can use to assert the discipline of the school on the students where they can't answer back about it. I liked what you said earlier about the posters on the wall. I like what a tactic I have is at the beginning of every class, school year, I'll get kids to help write the rules for the classroom. Now, of course, I
Yeah.
know
Kind of like a
what I'm going to
charter,
get
like a
in,
charter. Yeah. Yeah.
charter, excellent, and
Yeah.
get them all to sign it
Yeah.
and then you laminate it, and then you put it on the wall, and you can point to it in a lesson. In a lesson, okay, you've signed. That's not
Mhm.
going to happen. So for me, assertive discipline was me
That's very
switching
much
my
so. That's very much a primary school thing.
right.
That's big in primary schools. Obviously, that's very regimented. That's how they do it. They get these little kids to have ownership of the
Yeah, I think
behavioural
ownership's
policies.
really important. I think it's good you can stick that if you got the time, put it in there. Exercise books. I know lots online now, but I still think that's important. I think yeah, switching my vocabulary from reacting,
Mm.
knowing, looking back, they knew how to press the buttons, and kids will learn how to wind you up. And let's get Mr. Furnival all night. Stopping that into I'm going to assert myself. I'm going to assert the school now. Clear, non-arguable sentences that students then must follow. It's a choice. Okay, I can say to you, okay, you can follow the rules, or you're going to have to leave the class. It's your decision. You now have a choice to make. And I think
Yeah,
that's so powerful with students. You can
yeah,
stop throwing the rubber. You can work quietly, or I can ask you to leave, or I can call a member of staff, or I can give you detention, or I can contact home. You decide. It's a really small but clever way of actually saying to you, okay, you've now got a decision. I'm putting the ball in your court. You want to make that decision. I will call home if you want me to. If you're going to do that, I will call your parents
yeah,
not arguing a toss with them about what's happened, just saying what is going to happen. And I really think that's important. Give them a way out. Don't back a kid into the corner. especially in front of the class, because they care more about their rep to their
Yeah.
friends in the year group than they do whether or not they actually had their phone out or whatever. So I think a few little things there that really helped me turn it and not. I think I overreacted probably as a young teacher because I really wanted this lesson I'd worked really hard on. Um, to go well. And also, I probably took it a bit too personally when I
Mhm.
know I've spoken to you and you said earlier on this, they're not thinking about me overnight. They're not thinking
Yeah.
that. But I probably took it as, how can you not be interested? How dare you do that?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. 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 And it was the journey that you described is interesting. I mean, again, I'm from a slightly earlier time where things were again somewhat different, and the emphasis, as we've talked before, was on individuality and making
Yeah.
it alone. So that coloured my approach to quite a large degree. I did want the kids to see that I was going to sort my own problems out,
Yeah.
because that was more akin to what they would have seen in the other classrooms they went to with much more experienced staff, the big hitters. So I knew I wasn't a big hitter at that stage, but I wanted to try and at least show the kids that I could look after myself. However, I wasn't that maverick that I was going to avoid one, the school rules, nor was I not going to seek help when I eventually needed it, which was the case. I always, even to the day I retired from teaching, I always started every class at the start of every year, irrespective of age or context, with these are my two golden rules. One, because towards the end, obviously, kids would come into my classroom and behave anyway, by and
Yeah.
large, without your reputation and all of that. But my two golden rules were: when I speak, you will listen. Again, assertively expressed, because that's the foundation of everything. Too many
Perfect.
classrooms. Still today, I'll go into classrooms where that that focus on what the teachers say, the instructions given, how and why we're doing things, how time's going to roll out. If kids are not listening to even if it's kind of that polite, slightly
Yeah.
having a conversation with the person next to you, but kind of
My
listening.
number one
We don't.
bugbear.
I mean, don't forget. Teachers will then go into staff meetings with their head or
Oh
something,
God.
and be doing that the same as the kids. It's a human
Oh,
thing to
don't.
do. It's
I
actually
know.
quite a strange thing,
I
actually,
know.
for human beings to sit there in rows listening to one person under the
Yeah.
pain of death.
Yeah.
So you've got to assert it, because you
Yeah.
cannot trust them to be adult enough at 12 to have a whispered conversation and aside whilst also listening to you, which adults by and large can do a lot better. So it was, I speak, you listen. And the other one was, do your best work. Now
Yeah.
I know that's a very, very broad and amorphous thing to ask them, but I always wanted them uppermost in their mind. What I was saying is, if you work hard for me, I'll praise you for your effort. I don't
Yeah.
care. I didn't say this. I don't care if you're the brightest kid in the world or you really, really struggle. It's irrespective. So immediately I was getting for that. I'm going to treat you all the same. There's no favourites here. But there was individuality in there, and I did try to go it my own way. And I did, again, given the context I was teaching in, did make a few mistakes. But by and large, I worked very, very hard on the thing we talked about last time, which was establishing those positive relationships. So I didn't have to spend huge amounts of every lesson worried about behavior management. And
Mm,
I got the balance kind of right with a few pitfalls along the way.
sure.
Today, if I was coming in today as a new teacher, obviously things are very different and these very strong systems exist. I'd probably be glad of them, but knowing me, I'd probably struggle a little bit with them. I'd want to be a little bit more of an individual, but that's just knowing myself. Or maybe it's just because I'm from a different generation, and I don't really encounter, when I go into school, there's occasionally I'll have a conversation with a teacher who's in a school about their very strict school-based systems, and you can see they're a bit uncomfortable with them and they'd like to break out from them, but it's quite rare. By and large, the teachers now are like, thank God I know what to do in every
Yeah.
single scenario, because then I can get on with teaching, and that's the thing I want to be good at. So just the
Yeah.
world changes, doesn't it? And so
Does.
let's go on to next. So let's, without, again, we've got to be careful and polite enough not to mention full names, but we
Sure.
can describe people or maybe use first names. Just get some of the people you've worked with in this regard, behaviour management, that have very different approaches. Who would
Oh
you
yes.
cite or describe?
Yeah, I've seen a lot. The first one, the silent and wait teacher, who you've mentioned a few things like the reputation. He'd been at the school many, many, many years. He taught parents. So one, they're coming in with that. And he's a teacher that taught me what you just said. Never speak over a class. And I've held that from the
Yeah.
very beginning to now. So
Don't compete with the noise. Yeah.
no, yeah, I'm not carrying on. So I've seen that. There's silent and wait. I've another teacher, a youngish female teacher, had the great stare. Seeing her do the
Yeah.
stare, and I knew her first time I went in the class. I went, oh God, she reminds me of a teacher when I was at school.
Yeah.
I've seen the really loud, the overbearing. All right, sit down, let's go. Now that worked for that teacher because they were head of year seven,
Yeah.
and they again were well known and well respected. But it's a bit of a one trick pony. I think you can't always go that way. You can't be the louder than I'm going to be louder than you, basically. I was next door to this teacher, and this teacher, and I was loud, don't get me wrong. This teacher, that was it. The one trick, the overbearing, that teacher. I saw a couple of teachers who didn't look for popularity. Now, we've spoken about you're not their friend, but you want a relationship. I've seen teachers who don't particularly care for that relationship. They
Yeah.
care for the authority. They're
Yeah.
standoffish. Now, these ones didn't really have much trouble. They got the silence. There wasn't much relationship, but that was their way of
Yeah.
doing it. And one of the teachers actually who I didn't follow their way of doing it whatsoever, but they did tell me in my NQT year, as it was then, follow everything up, which is what you've said. Let them know you're going to follow it up. And she encouraged me to follow through, go to their form room, make sure if they miss their attention, you follow it up. And that really did work in the long term. So that was a good bit of advice from that teacher. Another teacher I think was naturally, it wasn't put on. Just had the relationship with the students. They could see he was there. He was actually in your department. He was there with the kids. He got, without being forcing it or needing it, the kids knew he was on their side. And if you now, I don't know if you can teach that. That's
Yeah.
natural, and that's teacher that good relationship. You have the kids eating, even the tough kids, eating out the palm of your hand quite early on. I saw that teacher do. I've seen a couple of teachers. One was a very good friend of mine, good colleague, was the banter, the quick wit, the comebacks. Now I did that myself, and you got to know yourself. There's the barrier, the boundaries there. Because if you make, I've seen teachers make mistakes through this, and they've gone too
Yeah.
far, and then they've offended the student, and that's really, really bad. But I think if you can have that relationship with the students where, as I said, maybe I'd say, oh, with the F off thing, oh, well, God, I heard that this morning off the wire. So that's not the worst thing I've heard today. Get a bit of a laugh, break the awkwardness. It can be really good. But again, I don't think you can teach that. I think that's your personality. I think you do have to be what a cliche. You've got to be yourself, but there's different ways to do it. But don't try and do something you can't hold up because you're going to be, in the classroom with these kids for the whole year. Um, Again, you've mentioned reputation. I've seen teachers walking down the corridor, reputation. The corridor, the kids all be quiet and walk into line without the teacher having to do anything. I think that can be how long they've been in the school. It can be the lesson they teach. It can be their position in the school as well. So they're just some of the ones I've noted down. The real big differences for me are the ones who've gone in. I'm in there with you for the journey for the kids against the ones who are not.
Yeah.
I'm going to
As we
teach you
mentioned
this
before, yeah.
subject.
Yeah.
You're going to learn it. I don't really care what's going on with you in your life. I'm not going to chat to you about whatever. And I've seen both teachers pull that off in a completely different way with the same students. One probably got more out of it than the second one, the one who's in it with the students. However, yeah, interesting that I've seen a couple with really standoffish ones work as well. So yeah, there's some of the characters that I've
Yeah.
I've I've observed
Yeah,
that
a
you
good list there, Ollie. Yeah, but there's types, isn't there? And I recognise
yeah
all of those types. And interestingly, again, alluding to those schools like I was first in, where it was like every man or woman for him or herself, find your own way in this regards. We've got the school rules, of course, but within the classroom, work it out yourself. Unfortunately, and they still exist. I still go to schools that of different types where that's still there. And the problem is it with you get a wide variety of experiences because of
Mm.
the things you've described in strength, personality, and experience. So that first school I was at in Southport, the deputy head, who I'll name Dave, literally the kids knew he was walking. He could be 100 yards away on another corridor. They were wary.
Yeah.
He was, he had the power of life or death over them. That was him. And yet in the same school at the same time, there was a young teacher. I won't mention her name. She taught history, who had more difficulties with even decent, well-behaved, because it was boys' school, boys, than I've ever seen. I mean, got to the point where because she had not the personality nor the systems, she had nothing. She was cut
Yeah.
adrift. So he got to the stage apparently at some point where boys locked her in her own store cupboard
Uh,
and wouldn't let her out until she sang Bar Bar Black Sheep,
terrible.
which unfortunately she
Oh
did.
dear.
So of course
Oh,
they let her out. And then subsequently, eventually, she was kind of forced out of the school
sure.
because it wasn't going to work. And she went to another school on the other side of town and got a job eventually. And I heard, it may be apocryphal, but I heard that because it was a relatively small town, of course, everybody knew each other. The word got round that about the blah blah black sheep thing, and so kids at the new school locked her in the store cupboard and wouldn't let her out till she sang blah blah black sheep, and she did it
Jesus.
again. So I think what in you
Yeah.
taking that really quite desperate,
Mm.
extreme anecdote is to illustrate why the systems are needed,
Yeah.
and the reliance on personality and strength of character. It's great if you've got it, but it's by and large it's better the other way. You can add that on top, and then you're really strong. If you've got a very strong system that everybody buys into, follow, and you get to follow, and everybody on the staff, all the right people are supporting you, and then your own individuality and great relationships with kids, you've made it. You've
Def-
absolutely made it.
100% agree with that. 100% agree. And personality is a key word. Yeah, and I think we've both seen teachers over our career that some, I think, I remember you even telling me you were quite impressed by one who said it's not for me, it's not for everyone,
Yeah,
the management part of it. But yeah, you've got to have a personality. Yes, if you're just screaming at students, you've broken rule 2.8, it's not going to work. They've got to know that you're well aware they respect the school rules. They know you respect them and you follow them, and you've got your own personality. I think that can work well.
yeah,
That's the best combination, mate.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm going to throw another couple of things at you in this. Again, we're going to look at this again, but for today's session, the next one is a big part of this is rewards and sanctions. Now, tell me about your experience of those and what works well, systems that work well, why it's so important to have that balance between rewards and sanctions. Because we've talked about sanctions, really, haven't we, in
Sure.
managing poor behavior, etc. But there's a whole other part of it, which is rewards,
Yeah.
maybe related to behavior. So tell me all about that and your experience of that.
Yeah, I'm very big on rewards. I first hit me when I became what we then called gift and talented coordinator, and the London Borough rep who I worked with, Anne. Unfortunately, she has passed away now.
Okay.
Yeah, she had a very good talk with me about. She was obviously a borough rep, and the big difference between rewards in primary and secondary, um, and the difference in how everything's celebrated in primary. Not that secondary don't do anything, but it wasn't as much. So I really think that students need to have rewards. So you can make some fun things in your own class. You can use a little bit of initiative about boy and girl. I used to do it in homeroom. I think I spoke about before. Boy and girl of the week every week, but you can do that in your own subject. So what I've done in three schools I've worked at, I think, is have just little cards, just a well done card, and
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be you got 100% in the test or whatever. It's well done for the improvement I've seen, and little things like that. It can be that they've done the homework well or a presentation. Really good to focus a reward on something that student isn't particularly good at, and they've made a little bit of progress. So student maybe just 5 minute presentations, done a starter, done a plenary, a little reward like that is fantastic. And the key for that is also email it home, because parents love that. And that really stands you in good stead, because they'll know that you are a teacher that celebrates success. And when things go wrong, they'll know that you're someone who actually will look at both sides. And I've had tough kids, parents who are maybe not always tough behavior, but tough in not particularly getting success. And these parents have told me how much they really appreciate the rewards. So we can do rewards in you can be really creative, of course, again, within the school boundaries. You don't want to be
Yeah,
throwing sweets and chocolate eggs or whatever at kids if it's, obviously with allergies, etc. But for
yeah,
me, rewards, even a little comment in a book, mark book, now this is really good as well when you're going around the lesson. I think a big thing we'll talk about again is checking with students, little check-in with a kid and write down excellent, fantastic, just a little note for a kid. Or if we used to have stamps when we worked together, if it works in your school, or house points, honestly, even the cool kids like it. They won't show you they like it, but it's really,
yeah.
really
Well,
important. So
that's I've written down here rewards myth that
yeah.
the cool kids, so called as you call
Oh,
them, are not interested on them. Never found that. They do quietly. It goes to, I mean, getting rewards right is not as easy as people imagine,
no.
because you can go too far. Things like appropriate rewards and appropriate praise. We'll
Sure.
talk again, probably in a feature session, about how praise should be appropriate. And that's probably a big thing in primary school, actually, and secondary school, but mostly primary, in which you can't just say well done for everything that's expected. If you
No.
just say to kids, well done, and praise them because they've done a bit of work, or you know, they've picked a piece of paper off the floor, or they've been quiet for 5 minutes, you're rewarding things that should be expected.
Sure.
So people are working very, very hard at making sure rewards and praise are often individualized. If there's been behavioral issues with a child or a group, then the reward or the praise comes for amending that and getting that thing right.
Yeah.
So that's something I see increasingly. And in primary, the thing about reporting code, they'll have systems like Class Dojo. Have you heard of that? Which
No.
is a kind of big system used here in Britain, where kind of electronically stored merits and praise and rewards immediately get sent home via an emailing system, I think, to parents. So on a daily basis, they're getting the praise, the rewards, and then of course they're having those daily conversations about behavioural issues and so on.
Yeah.
There's too often I'll go into classrooms today, and it's about, you'll see teachers, secondary, whiteboard, marker pen, writing students' initials down, sanction, warning. It may be two warnings and then a sanction, two warnings and a sanction, two warnings and a sanction. List the names, list the names, list the names. And the kids go, oh, my name's on the board. It's visual.
Yeah.
I'll best shut up now. And I'll say at the end of the lesson, yeah, your sanction system is definitely having an impact. They noticed that their initials were on the board. You didn't need to have a conversation. They then amended their behaviour to a large degree. Where's the rewards? Where's the balance? Is it just one without the other? The best teacher I ever saw, and she was a young maths teacher, secondary, who I was going to on her QTS assessment day. And what she'd done is so simple. She put on a whiteboard the seating plan for the classroom that never changed. So every child that came in knew where they sat in each maths class she taught across all the
Yeah.
year groups. She had a blue pen and a red pen, or green pen and a red pen, marker pen. Every time a child did something that was contrary to the rules that she'd discussed and that existed in the school, she just put a red dot where they're sitting. No names,
Nice.
no initials, none of that, no discussion, red dot. If it was a reward for something that she'd asked that she wanted them to do and they did successfully, it was the green dot. And that was it. It was just dots on a board. There was no conversation. The whole lesson flowed. The kids said, "That's me. I sit there," because they know what they sit. And they've done it,
Brilliant.
in a maths lesson 4 times a week, 5 times a week. It was the most flawless and seamless system.
Yeah,
And
very
because
good.
the other problem is that often you'll get teachers writing down names on the whiteboard for praise, for rewards or sanctions. And at
Yeah.
the end of the lesson, they'll say, "What are you going to do with these now?" Oh, I'm not sure. Oh, or they don't
Yeah.
write the names down. So how do you remember those names? You've just said you're going to reward this child for something, and you've not. How are you going to remember that? So having that system is really important, and that was
That's
just the best.
excellent.
That was the best one I saw, and it didn't take up any time. There was no discussions. There was no arguments, and the kid knew if I've got two red dots, that's it. I'm coming back for a detention or a conversation at the end of the lesson.
The last time I taught in England, we the school had used Sims, and yeah, you could put sanctions and rewards on Sims in the register. Afterwards, it was like keeping a big tally. I used to do in the school we worked at. I was about there for about 9 years. I didn't really like putting names on boards. I thought it was a
Yeah,
little bit name and shame. I did it because it was a school rule, and it
you
was
didn't like
good
the
that it
name
was
and shame
consistent. I
thing.
didn't
Yeah,
like it.
yeah.
But so what I used to use a sad face and a happy face, and I'd write the good names on the board. And then most kids did that well. Some go, I want my name on the board. I said that, but I think what is really good for a reward is a little word after a lesson. Especially as you said with behaviour. If they've behaved better or they've done something that you've asked them to do, you say, done well today, well done. I remember one kid was being a real pain, one lad in year eight. And I remember one lesson I went in, I only taught them weekly, and yeah, I didn't feel well at all. And I was, probably had the flu or a cold, went in, I felt terrible. And this kid was fine. And at the end of the lesson, I just held him back. I said, oh, well, yeah, well done today. You have a lot better behaviour. Well done. He goes, well, you looked ill, sir. I didn't want to take advantage. A bit of a
Oh,
laugh and walked out. So
isn't
fair
that
enough.
nice? Isn't that
Yeah.
nice? That's
Yeah.
he's a good lad all the time.
Good lad at art.
Brilliant,
Yeah.
brilliant. So one was getting to there before you hit me with some dastardly scenario you've been thinking about.
Yeah.
Uh, it's all going wrong. So you've tried with the class, you've tried with the group
Yeah.
of kids. It's just getting worse. You're not getting anywhere. They're starting to swamp your thinking, and you're starting to lose all your confidence. When it all goes wrong, and you can no longer get it back in the classroom, where do we seek help? How do we do that?
Yeah. Certainly. I think we're going to do two on behaviour, aren't we? Two episodes on behaviour.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I think
Definitely.
next time we'll do maybe some strategies, but I've got a lot of strategies. But if they go wrong, where do we go for help? Well, first of all, obviously colleagues.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk to you about a class in a minute, but yeah, this class I found, I thought, oh God, it's an absolute nightmare. Spoke to a colleague because I looked up who teaches them, and she said it's the worst class she's had in her career, and I just felt, oh, good,
Well,
it's not just me. But
it's good to
colleagues,
know that other people are struggling.
yeah, it is
It's
good to
good to
know. And
know that it's not
actually,
just you. Yeah.
I remember thinking it's good to know that it's also other established teachers than me. So I said that Sims thing, you could actually find how many things were going on with that student that day. And yeah, and then you go and speak
So
to
just to
teachers.
let people know, Sims is the electronic kind of register
Sure.
recording
Yeah.
system that a lot of schools have. Yeah.
So for me, the first people to go to obviously other subject teachers who have them.
Yeah.
What do they do? It could be anything from who do you sit them with, anything like that. Of course, homeroom teachers, form tutors who will hopefully have a good relationship with that student. I've done it a few times. I was new to a school and I was an experienced teacher, and we'll talk about this perhaps next time. And I've been in schools where I was pretty much I very rarely had class two management. I went to one school where they didn't know me, and I had a year seven class, and they were like really bad at first. I thought, "Don't you know who I am?" So I purposely went to their form and spoke to them in front of their form tutor, and I thought, right, I'm going to make a show to show you who I am. But I spoke to their form tutor, who told me they're an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
So I would say, obviously, colleagues, you'll get a
Yeah.
lot. The staff rooms are staff rooms are great places to be if you want to learn about what works and what doesn't. Form tutors, of course, head of year. The head of year will have maybe, or they'll be able to pull them aside if you want them to. The head of year is a good person to talk to a student with. However, you mustn't. It's a line here. You don't want that student to think you can't handle it yourself and you're sat there sheepishly in the corner while the head of
Yeah.
year tells them off. You've got to, in my opinion, you've got to take charge of that and use them as a witness. But you've got to show the student that you mean business there. And then, of course, parents. The majority of parents will act. And I say to my teachers now, right, contact a parent and you'll see a change. Parents have a lot of power. Parents can,
Oh,
as I
yeah.
say, ban the phone, stop them going out. Most parents, not all, I've had dealt with a few parents who'll back the child even when they've done wrong.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most parents will have a say, and as I said earlier, for that student to see you now have a direct link to their subject teachers, head of year, form tutor, and parents, they're less likely, I think, to think that if they see you as alone, someone alone,
Yeah,
then
you're
and someone
isolated.
who doesn't act, then
Yeah.
why were they going to stop? They're winding up, having a good time. So that'd be my ones to talk to. Yeah,
Yeah, they're all sensible and they're all right. You've got to admit you've got a problem, and that can be quite
yeah.
hard for
It- it-
any professional to do. Anybody that's invested so heavily in this new career and establishing himself in the classroom to say, I'm actually struggling, and admitting that there's nothing wrong with that.
no,
As we said in an earlier episode, there are a few people we've encountered in our careers who never seem to have who would never be professional enough to admit that they also have problems with very difficult students. But most people are prepared to say, yeah, it's
yeah,
okay, it's the way it is. We'll help you. We'll do what we can. One of the things I'd always advocate, we have mentioned this before, is going to watch the same kids being taught by another teacher
yeah,
who's more experienced and for some reason just gets the best out of them, and certainly as far as behaviour is concerned, just gets it right. And there's nothing wrong with that. Picking
yeah,
their brains. There'd be other things that you're better at, but they're just better at that. It's
yeah.
all right. It's all right.
Yeah, 100%. Don't be embarrassed. I
No,
know, as I said earlier, take it personally. I took it personally. And you might feel worried about how others think about you, but no, I think it's a big step. And I've asked a lot of staff. Luckily, in our department, we had deputy head teachers, we had people who've been there a long time. So I think I've always worked in very supportive faculties, and no
no,
one's going to think twice about
no.
you as not being able to do it. So let me hit you with
Oh yeah, go on
something,
then.
a
Yeah, yeah, go.
scenario. So yeah,
Finish
just
off on
going
this.
back, you've reminded me. So what? I think I was in my second year at a school, and as I said, that is a lot easier, but I had problems with the class. Now, the interesting thing about this class was I'd say it was a majority of the students that were out of the very poor classroom management. In this school, we had bands. They were the third band down. They were called our band. They weren't expected to get C's in any GCSEs to be in that band. And I was teaching a new subject, citizenship. And not only that, but at that stage, it was a short course. So they had half citizenship, half RE. It couldn't have been lower on their priorities. They weren't behaving well anywhere. However, in my class, I would have students come in, almost be laughing if I'd ask, "Where's your homework?" This was a GCSE, remember? I had students openly mocking each other. Didn't get so far as they were mocking me openly, but they would, they'd use in jokes about, the kids in the class who everyone took the mickey out of. We had a few big players in the year group there, and some of them were talking to each other, but I could hear about illegal drugs, about doing this and that down a park on a Friday night, and I really felt that early on with those students that that my authority wasn't they weren't taking my authority seriously. They didn't have any buy-in to education particularly. They were grade 10, year 10 and 11, so they still had to be in school, but their future wasn't. They weren't going to go on to
No.
college. They had no interest, and they were treating my 2 lessons a week as literally, for majority, a time to have a chat, a catch up, and just completely do no work whatsoever. And I felt, I've got a problem here.
Right, that's a tricky one.
Yeah,
I'd be interested to see what you did about that eventually.
yeah,
If it was me in those circumstances, you've got two problems, haven't you? You've got the behaviour management issue, the language, the
yeah,
inappropriate, the defiance, if you like,
yeah,
and you've got the issue of trying to deliver a subject and not making any progress, which you're responsible for with those students. And I don't think you can achieve one without the other. You can't get one right without getting the other one right. For me, probably, I would start thinking back to the way I would have been with my delivery of the subject, in that I'd rip it up. I'd rip it up. If this is a class where there isn't, and they do exist, and that we do have a duty to all students, of course. But if this subject, which is new to them, is not fundamentally crucial to them going forward into their adult lives, you've got to circumvent it. You've got to reinvent it. You've got to key into what they're interested in. Be clever. Be cleverer than them. Ask them the questions. Do some kind of survey. Which of these would you enjoy? Which one do you want to do first? Which of these do you not find interesting? Which elements of this subject which I have to teach would you like to work on? Give them a sense of some kind of autonomy and control and choice, artificial to some extent, though that may be. That's the first part I'd work on. I'd have to.
Yeah.
They're going to come into your room. You've got to want them to try and be there, and by wanting to be there a little bit more, their behaviour will probably improve. It would
Yeah.
tend to be. Obviously, there's some as far as the behaviour is concerned, there's some non-negotiables which you're going to have to. We talked about establishing a charter. I think this is a class that would need that charter
Yeah.
in which you establish the things that are acceptable, that you've got to win on, the foul language, the confrontation between each other, the defiance of you, etc., the not listening, and boil it down to the fewest rules you can, the fewest rules you can, because then they've only got to concentrate on 3 or 4 things. That's the next thing to do. And then again, we've talked about this before, you are not going to win every battle. So the things that are less big, the things that even though it pains you to do it, that you can turn a blind eye or ear to, that are not the end of the world that they may be doing, you might just have to let them go and stick with your 2 or 3 or 4 non-negotiables. And then as things start to improve as they should, then you can push further on the relationship and get those other things in place. But it's a classic, you can't have one without the other. And
No.
definitely my starting point would be, I've got to want them to be in this room.
Mm.
That's the big problem. So how am I going to achieve that? The behavior, I've got to stamp certain big things out, but there's no way I'm going to win the war. I've got to win a few little battles first before I'm ever going to win the war. So you had that situation. How did you deal with it?
Yeah, no, that's all excellent advice. I remember, for me, of course, citizenship, they should all be interested in social, politics and that, but they weren't. The main thing that I did was I took them on, and I tried to do that one by one to try to get through because it was quite bad. It was, yeah. There were some students there who were good kids, but the tone of the lesson was, well, this isn't that important. Plus, am I really going to be the one working when the rest of the kids are talking about this and that? So I tried to divide.
Yeah.
I did change. I remember I did change my teaching. I did a lot of support, and then I stopped trying to be Mr. New teacher because I was a new teacher. But I did. I remember I did do a lot more. I always remember I did a. I created a whole quiz on. I went for the whole textbook, created a quiz, and just had reading, answering. A lot of sub things where right, we're going to have to do book work. I can't be having group discussions when you're just going to break into silliness. So I changed my teaching, not the way I wanted to, but the way that I could see I could get some results. What I did do, and I remember because one of the students spoke to me a few years later saying how they admired me for this. I didn't let anything pass. Now I probably went too far.
Yeah.
In your small victories is right, but at the time, I remember I chased down. I went to the head of year. I actually went to the deputy head teacher, who was deputy head for behaviour on it. What I did was, you could call it an easy way out, but I remember getting some removed from class for a couple of weeks, and then let back in, and the behaviour did improve. But I knew the worst of the worst students, and I spoke to that student with the head of year, but I made sure, and the head of year kind of coached me a bit on setting, like you said, my boundaries. And the
Yeah.
funny thing is with that student was that I've only mentioned it before, but I've put it in some writing I've done that I came to school. I'd been to West Ham, but Tottenham. I'm a Tottenham fan. I was in the West Ham end, and he'd seen me in the Tottenham end, and he brought the conversation up, and he was really impressed that I was at the game and I was in the
Mm.
Tottenham end. And seriously, it changed. It wasn't
Mm.
perfect,
Yeah.
but the way he saw me as someone who he could just attack as a
Yeah.
teacher, represented the school that he wasn't interested
Mm.
in, to someone, oh, he
Yes.
actually is a bit of a football fan. So that changed. So Did I get perfection? No, but I did get improvement in behavior. And I remember the lad, one of the lads who was speaking about the drugs, etc., wasn't didn't have a problem with him one to one. He was just showing off in the class, and
Yeah,
he had to have, you know, his social status, and he had to
yeah.
use that, and keep going with that. So one by one, I dealt with the students, and it wasn't perfect, but it did improve. And as I said, I had a nice comment a few years later when I saw one of the students, about, oh yeah, we did respect you, sir. Like, I didn't look at seem like it at the time, but yeah, it was a hard task. However, it's really helped me in my career because I think that put a lot of hairs on my chin,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I
you do.
think
You
I
do
learned a
need,
lot.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, you do need. If you don't have those early experiences, how do you learn? I mean,
Yeah,
sometimes it can be too safe, can't it? And then you
yeah,
move to a school that's got problems and you don't know how to cope. The
yeah.
thing that you said that most interested me is that kind of contrary to what I was suggesting, you went all in. You were determined to follow everything up. The interesting thing being that, and I think it's a good point that even though at the time they may not have thought it and you weren't feeling it, they developed a begrudging respect for you, and I think
I
they
think,
do.
yeah, I think,
I think students that know that they're winning and it's negative, they'll say they're going to give up on us. Everybody
yeah.
gives up on us because it's us, right? Nobody cares. And the fact that you didn't, that they probably were quite respectful. You gained their respect. They were probably quite admiring of that. So, but
I think it ended up like that. It was a small class because, as I say,
yeah,
it was the R band. It
yeah,
was, you know, that. I'm not saying, yeah, whether or not we should have that banding, we can discuss in another episode. But yeah, probably 12 to 15 kids in the class. You know, a
yeah.
lovely sized class. The trouble is, 12 to 15 didn't want to be in school.
Yeah,
And
well, there's all sorts of dynamics in class size. We'll talk about in the
yeah,
future, of course,
yeah,
where a class can be too small, the kids can be too intimate and know each other too well. It can be just as bad as a class that's too big and you can't get to know anybody. But that's for another
um,
time. But
yeah. Before we, sorry, go
sorry,
on.
Ollie, go.
No, so before we finish today, I didn't ask you what you did in that scenario with the F officer. What happened
No,
there?
no, it was an imaginary one. Never
Oh,
happened.
okay. Oh, okay.
Things
Got
similar
you.
to that happened, but that I just
Yeah,
wanted to find something that was. So
got you.
no, I can't give you an answer to that.
Ah, okay.
Pretty much, no, honestly, pretty much the way you described your response would have been mine,
Cool.
100%. I went for something a little bit more generic than yours, which is very personal. But yours, particularly, better than mine because it is personal. It actually happened. Just shows you how complex and difficult this part of the job is. And
It
going back to
is.
the early point, why old teachers like me still wake up in a sweat in the middle of the night, two
Oh,
or three
yeah.
times a year, thinking,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
my God, thank God I'm awake and I'm not still teaching and having to deal with these uncontrollable students that I don't know. It's a
Mm.
really deeply embedded anxiety, whoever you are, that kind of never goes away. Strange, isn't it?
It is. It is. It's a horrible feeling when you think, and it's happened couple of times when you think, right, I've lost this class now. I've got to, this, it's me, I'm the teacher, and yeah, the
Yeah.
behaviour's now not where I want it to be. And
Oh,
yeah,
but
it's horrible.
by and large, it's not like that, isn't it?
No, no,
By and
that's no.
large,
We learn the tricks of the trade with
yeah,
the personality sprinkled in.
yeah.
It's mainly fine. Yeah.
Okay, well, it was great, Ollie. Thanks once again.
Cool.
I think hopefully we've made people think, people that are in the profession, thinking of going in the profession, training within it, those long finished, who are reflecting back on their time
Yeah.
at what we used to call the chalk face a long time ago. So for those of you out here that are following us, once again, please like our content and subscribe to our channel. Um, Share it, forward it to other people and share
Please
it,
do.
please.
Yeah.
Don't worry about doing that. Anybody you think might be interested. And of course, you can always email us if you've got any points to make or questions to ask at Terry and Olly Talk Teaching at gmail.com, which will flash up on the screen at the end. Okay, well, see you
Cool.
again soon, Ollie,
Thanks
for
for your
another
time. See you
session.
again soon, everyone.
And take care. Say hello
Yeah,
to
you too.
Japan.
Yeah, and to
Cheers,
London.
mate. Bye bye.
Cheers. See ya.